Did you get hurt while serving in the military? You could qualify for tax-free monthly VA disability payments.
This is one of the VA benefits we will be discussing today. We will also be examining the anniversary of the Battle of Midway. And get this, if you join the military out of the state of Texas and are a Texas resident, you could qualify for free college tuition.
Those are only some of the topics we will be covering, so stick around. It's time for the Sit Rep.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the inaugural episode of the Sit Rep. I am Marine Corps veteran Paul Corbett.
And I'm Army veteran Mike McNamara. Recently, Paul had an interview with Mark Ramos from the Veterans Benefits Administration, who has more than 40 years working in VA disability claims. They discussed the ins and outs of filing a service-connected disability claim with the VA. Take a look.
Before we ever got on camera, we were discussing the fact that whether something's a symptom or if it's an actual disability, right, and the difference between that, if something is secondary to a primary, or,
there's a couple of different aspects to that. You're exactly right. A symptom is not a disability. You can have symptoms and anybody can describe symptoms, but only a doctor can diagnose something.
Right.
Okay. So, if a veteran, files a claim and says, I'm having nightmares due to my combat experience, okay? It has never been diagnosed with a mental health condition, for instance. It's going to be hard for us to grant, we can't grant compensation for nightmares. We can grant compensation for post-traumatic stress. So, there is a difference, When it comes to physiological conditions, my left knee hurts. Anybody is competent to say my left knee hurts. You understand your pain,
right?
Okay, but why does your left knee hurt? Is there something in your service treatment records that shows you had an injury and that you were treated for it in the service? That's key for us. Looking at those service treatment records and saying, okay, the veteran, reported to sick bay that day after falling down in PE, right? And had an X-ray and was diagnosed with a knee sprain. Okay, that's key for us because that shows the link between the claimed disability and service. Okay, so having those service treatment records available to us is key. And seeing mention of that is enough for us to say, okay, this is a valid claim. Let's see whether or not there's a residual disability from that injury.
So two of the key takeaways that I've got currently, I'm sure I'm going to end up with two hands full of them, but it's that, number one, there needs to be a diagnosis of some sort. Mm-hmm. And that diagnosis has to be related to something that actually occurred or was aggravated by military service.
That's important too.
And the only exception to that is when it's presumptive for something that Congress said, okay, anybody that was exposed in country to Agent Orange and has these issues going on, whether it's diabetes or skin cancer or something like that, boom, you're going to take care of it.
That's exactly on point. Everything you say there is exactly on point.
So this is a really common sense issue that I hear all the time when talking to veterans. They tend to get caught up on the symptoms instead of what the baseline is.
Yeah, it's very true. Veterans may send in a claim that says, "Oh, I'm having nightmares," but you can't diagnose that. Like there is no actual diagnosis in the DSM for that. So it needs to be connected to something else that the rater can actually look at. As Mark had said during our interview, the raters aren't medical professionals. They're taking information from medical providers and information that's provided by the veteran, whether it's from a chiropractor or from their own narrative or what have you, and putting all that together. So by not having those intricate details, such as a diagnosis, it ends up causing a lot of problems. It can delay the claim. It can end up, pushing the veteran to having to do another C&P exam, or unfortunately, it could end up being denied because there's just not enough evidence to support what's there.
Most veterans aren't walking around with "I have nightmares" in their medical records from when they did their military service.
Right.
So you're right. I mean, it's going to lead to probably the claim being denied. And now there's a frustration level that sets in on the part of the veteran and his family, when all along, if they had just got to the baseline, the underlying condition, which may be a PTSD condition, as you said, then they're going to have more success with their claim.
Right. And it's, I know because, well, we have discussions about stuff all the time, but I know that a part of it really actually rang true for you, my interview with Mark, and that's the buddy statements.
Absolutely. I learned through talking with other veterans about buddy statements and what they're all about. And I'll give you an example. I had filed a claim for sleep apnea based upon a lot of treatment that I was receiving at VA for the condition. But there wasn't anything in my military medical record that ever talked to sleep apnea, even though I had had those issues back while I was serving. And the reason for that was quite simple. Think back to your own military career. I went and complained to our physician's assistant over with the medics about some issues that I was having with sleep. And he was very honest with me. He said, listen, I can send you over to the hospital for a sleep study or to see what's going on. But to be perfectly honest, if it comes back with a condition, you could become non-deployable. And then
that's career ending.
Right. As an armor guy, as a combat arms guy in the Army, to be non-deployable, I mean, my career would have been over at least within the armor branch.
Right.
So I just said, yeah, forget it. I'll just deal with it. So there was never anything in my medical record talking about sleep issues or sleep problems. But then I learned when I filed the claim, it was denied the first time, and I went to appeal it. And a very good friend of mine said, you need to do buddy statements. And I was like, what's buddy statements? And you basically get statements from people you served with who knew you on active duty, served with you on active duty, whatever the case may be. And they can write an official statement that says, I know Paul Corbett had this issue. I saw it frequently. He snored, or whatever the case may be, to claim sleep apnea. I also had my wife write a statement. She can do a buddy statement also, saying that I had these issues going back since I got back from Desert Storm, the initial Desert Storm in 91. And I packaged all those buddy statements up, put them in with my appeal to the initial decision on sleep apnea, and it was approved. The buddy statements is what put it over the top for me. They knew I had it because of what the VA was doing for me, and then now with the buddy statements, they could trace it back to my time on duty, and the two came together, and I won the appeal, and I got service connection for sleep apnea.
So out of curiosity with that, I mean, with a lot of stuff that is service connected, there has to be like a date that something happened. This is the day that I fell off a cliff, or these are the dates that I was doing jump qualification, and that's when my knees started being bad. Was that the case when you were doing sleep apnea, or?
No, I think it just needed to be proven and shown that I was experiencing these issues when I was on active duty. My wife kind of tied it to a time period, if you will, in that she said she noticed they really got more intense when I came home from the initial Desert Storm deployment in 91. And then with my other buddies, the people who actually served with me, that was like, I remember being in a tent with Mike and he would snore all night. I mean, that was kind of the gist of their statements. We were on active duty at Fort Hood, Texas, in 1989 or whatever, and he snored consistently. Along those lines. And then I didn't have to say, no, on this date I started snoring. So if you are interested in hearing more about the ins and outs of submitting a VA disability claim, search for #TheSitRep on YouTube.
When we come back, we will be discussing the Battle of Midway and why it was so significant in World War II, especially in the Pacific.
The profile of George Washington appears on which military decoration? A, the Medal of Honor, B, the Purple Heart, C, the Meritorious Service Medal, or D, the Legion of Merit. The profile of George Washington appears on which military decoration? The answer is B, the Purple Heart. It is the oldest military award still given to U.S. military members. General George Washington's profile is on the award because it is based on an award founded by Washington during the Revolutionary War.
This month marks the 78th anniversary of the Battle of Midway. It was a pivotal battle for the United States in World War II, and here's Mike to explain why.
This week, in American military history, United States Naval, Marine Corps, and Army forces defeated the forces of Japan at the decisive Battle of Midway from June 3rd to the 7th, 1942. The Japanese attack, like the earlier attack on Pearl Harbor, sought to eliminate the United States as a strategic power in the Pacific. The Japanese hoped another devastating defeat would force the U.S. to seek peace, thus ensuring Japanese dominance throughout the Pacific. The Japanese plan called for diversionary attacks on the Aleutian Islands off the coast of Alaska, while the main force attacked and occupied the Midway Islands. The U.S. would have to react, and the Japanese forces would then destroy the American fleet. What the Japanese didn't know was that American code breakers had broken the Japanese naval codes and were well aware of the Japanese plans, thus laying a trap for the Japanese fleet. The battle opened on June 3rd when B-17s from Midway attacked the Japanese invasion force. On June 4th, the Japanese Navy launched air attacks against Midway from their aircraft carriers. The attack caused damage but did not destroy Midway's defenses. The Japanese were forced to launch a second attack on Midway. At the same time, American aircraft carriers began launching aircraft to strike the Japanese fleet. While the Japanese were preparing for their second attack on Midway, it was discovered that an American fleet was in the area. The Japanese commander immediately shifted from attacking Midway to striking the American fleet. The delay proved devastating to the Japanese. At 9:20 a.m., U.S. torpedo bombers began attacking the Japanese fleet. The American torpedo planes were old and slow and caused no damage to the Japanese. However, it caused all the Japanese fighters to drop to a lower altitude, which cleared the way for the American dive bombers at higher altitudes. At 10:22 a.m., the American dive bombers arrived over the Japanese fleet and began their attacks unopposed. Within 6 minutes, 3 of Japan's 4 aircraft carriers were hit and on fire. All 3 carriers had to be abandoned and sunk. The 4th Japanese carrier survived and launched a counterattack against the American fleet. The U.S. carrier Yorktown was hit and severely damaged, leaving just 2 American carriers to continue the fight. Late in the afternoon, the Americans found the 4th Japanese carrier and damaged her so badly she had to be sunk. On June 6th, the damaged American carrier Yorktown was found by a Japanese submarine and sunk. The battle came to an end on June 7th when the Japanese withdrew. Over the course of the 5 days, Japan lost 4 aircraft carriers, 1 heavy cruiser, 322 aircraft, and more than 3,000 men. The U.S. lost 1 carrier, 1 destroyer, and just over 300 men. The U.S. victory at Midway was called one of the most stunning and decisive blows in the history of naval warfare. The Japanese never again launched a major offensive in the Pacific.
Mike, that was a lot of interesting stuff. Like, I knew about Midway, but I didn't know that much, which is kind of sad because I'm a Marine.
Yeah.
But from my understanding, the numbers the Japanese had were just like overpowering. Like, how is it that America was even able to get a foothold in the Pacific?
Well, I think for this battle, and you're right, it was a pivotal battle. And I think there was a number of reasons why the Americans were able to prevail and win the Battle of Midway. The first one is code breaking. By this point in the war, the United States had broken the Japanese naval communication codes. So basically, the United States could read their mail. So they knew the Japanese were moving on Midway, and they had a really rough idea, the size of the fleet and the dates that they planned to be around Midway. So the United States was able to move its forces, its naval forces, up northeast of Midway and basically lay a trap for the Japanese, with the Japanese not expecting them to be there that early. The second reason, I guess, is really good reconnaissance. Since they knew the Japanese were coming, they laid out an extremely aggressive reconnaissance plan with Catalina flying boats that had, big time range, could really fly out there and look. And they kept them going every day, all day. And they were able to find the Japanese first. So the Americans discovered the Japanese fleet before the Japanese discovered the American fleet. And as you know, he who finds the other guy first and can shoot first usually wins.
Yeah.
I think the third reason was the Japanese commander and his staff, they got a little overwhelmed right in the middle, in that they had launched a strike on Midway, an airstrike on the island of Midway, to destroy installations and the airfield there, so that the Japanese invasion force would have an easier time getting ashore and conquering the island as they intended. But the strike wasn't as successful as they wanted it to be. So when the Japanese flyers were heading back to their carriers, they told the commander, it's going to need a second strike. We need to send another wave to attack the island. The Japanese commander had been holding back some of his air forces in case they found an American fleet that he could strike right away. But at this point, there were no reports that the American fleet was out there. So he hemmed and hawed a little bit, and then he finally decided, okay, let's change the ordinance from anti-shipping ordinance to attacking another airfield again. So they sent the planes down to the hangar deck and changed them all over to get ready to send a strike back to the island. While they were doing that, the American fleet was discovered. So they finally found the American fleet. And once again, the commander, he hemmed and hawed and took a little time, but then decided, nope, we got to change back. We got to change all of our ordnance back from ground attack back to naval attack. So he ordered that all, the bombs go away and torpedoes and all that be loaded. So that took time. Then when they were ready, and then now they were ready to bring the planes up to launch the strike on the American fleet, the airplanes that had been, Japanese airplanes that had been bombing Midway, now were back. They were back and looking to land. They were short on fuel. They had to land, or they were going to have issues. They were going to ditch in the sea. So now the Japanese commander had to make another decision. Okay, I hold up on the strike on the American fleet long enough to recover all my airplanes from the first strike on Midway. We'll get them put away. Then we'll bring the second strike up on deck and send it off to the Americans. Well, the problem with all that is it took a lot of time. And in that time, the Americans were able to launch a strike of their own and start to hit the Japanese aircraft carriers, start to hit the Japanese fleet. And torpedo planes came in. They weren't that successful, unfortunately. They were older models. They got shot down. But the good thing, if there could have been from that, was that it made all the Japanese fighter planes that were like circling the fleet, covering their fleet, they had to drop down low to attack the torpedo planes that were coming in. And then that left the skies above the Japanese fleet vacant. There was no Japanese airplanes up there, so that when the American bombers came in, they met no opposition. And they were basically able to pick and choose, and at that point, make an attack on the Japanese, pretty much unmolested by Japanese fighter planes. All they had to contend with was Japanese anti-aircraft fire, but they were able to just press home their attacks without fear of being shot down from an enemy fighter, and that's what they did. And then the fourth reason, I think, was quick tactical decision-making by the American aviators. When they got the report on where the Japanese fleet was, by the time they were in range and they could launch, that report was a couple of hours old. and the Japanese fleet had made some turns in order to launch its own strike against Midway. So it wasn't in that exact position. So when the American flyers got there, it was kind of empty ocean. But the commanders of the torpedo planes and the bombers did some quick calculating and made some good decision making, and kind of made a really great educated guess on where the Japanese had gone, and they changed course and found them. And then once they got there, they were able to coordinate their attacks and quick decision making on the spot. Initially, the attacks were all kind of concentrating on the same 2 Japanese carriers when there's still 2 more. There was 4 Japanese carriers. And some of the American commanders at the last minute broke off their attack and made a decision and dispersed their forces evenly across the fleet so they could inflict maximum damage. So, I mean, there was many, many reasons, but those 4 were probably the big ones that allowed the Americans to at least get the initial attack in and do so much damage to the Japanese.
So, Mike, I mean, either in your opinion or the opinion of military leadership from that time, why was Midway so important?
Midway was really important for 3 basic reasons. The first reason, and one of the most important ones, is it was the first time we stopped the Japanese in the Pacific. I mean, since December of 1941, after they attacked Pearl Harbor, they attacked all over the Pacific, as you're aware, the Philippines, Hong Kong, Singapore, on the Malay Peninsula, and they had been successful. So from December through June, December 41 through June of 42, they did whatever they wanted. They had been utterly successful. And this was the first time that they had been stopped. And the important piece was not only were they stopped, but their aircraft carrier fleet was decimated, so that they were never able to mount another major offensive in the Pacific again. The Japanese never mounted another offensive in the Pacific again. They basically had to react to whatever America did after that. The second real reason why our victory was so important was we only ended up losing 1 aircraft carrier at Midway. Our fleet left pretty much intact. You know, we inflicted grave losses on the Japanese while suffering minor losses ourselves. This was important because 2 months later, when we finally go on the offensive in the Pacific and we launch the invasion of Guadalcanal with the 1st Marine Division, we have a fleet intact that can protect and support those landings. You know, so we still had 4 aircraft carriers left in the Pacific in which to start those offensive operations just literally 2 months later. Where if we had suffered more losses to the Japanese at Midway, we probably would not have been able to do that with what we had available in the Pacific at the time. And the third reason why it was so critical is more of a strategic reason, and that is it allowed the Allies, Great Britain and the United States in particular, to execute the strategy they wanted, which was Germany first, which meant they could concentrate the majority of their forces and resources on fighting the Germans. Both President Roosevelt from the United States and Prime Minister Winston Churchill from England, both viewed Hitler and Nazi Germany as far more dangerous to overall world peace than they did the Japanese. And once we were able to stop the Japanese at Midway, and we knew we could contain them and we could start to go on the offensive on a limited basis in the Pacific, that allowed a lot more of our forces to be pushed to the European theater. And then in November of 42, 5-6 months later, we go on the offensive, and when we invade North Africa. So the victory at Midway put their fears at ease that the Japanese were stopped, and now we can really concentrate on Hitler and get him knocked out of the war first.
What a crazy time.
Very crazy time. Very crazy time. It was a world war. I mean, when you look at President Roosevelt and the Joint Chiefs at the time, I mean, they had to concentrate on a lot of areas. You had a major war going on in the Pacific and a major war in the Atlantic. And both were dangerous. Both were dangerous to the overall interests of the United States and world peace going forward.
It amazes me how you keep all this in your head. I don't know how you memorize all this stuff. But when we come back, we will be discussing options for veterans to use VA healthcare from home, and also what special benefits are available to veterans from the state of Texas. We will be right back.
Which actor was a general in the United States military? A. John Wayne, B. Frank Sinatra, C. James Stewart, D. Bob Hope, or E. Audie Murphy? Which actor was a general in the United States military? The answer is C. James Stewart. Jimmy Stewart served as an officer in the Air Force in World War II and Vietnam. He flew B-24 bombers over Europe and B-52s over Vietnam. He was promoted to Brigadier General in July 1959.
Recently, Mike spoke about the ways that veterans can access VA healthcare without actually going into a VA medical center.
Did you know that you or a loved one can see their VA healthcare provider from the comfort of home or while at work? VA Video Connect enables you to quickly and easily meet with your VA care team through secure and private video conferencing sessions from anywhere using the camera on your computer, phone, or tablet. However, please keep in mind this benefit cannot take the place of examinations that may require face-to-face assessment or observation. To access this benefit, a veteran must be enrolled in VA healthcare and contact the VA clinic to discuss video appointment options. Why leave home or take time off from work to go to the doctor? Choose VA and begin utilizing the benefits you earned and deserve.
So, Mike, you cover a lot in that video. It's in a minute and a half. There's a lot of information.
There is.
But if you could expand for the audience, what was the process like in setting up VA Video Connect?
The process was extremely easy. I was pleasantly surprised, to be perfectly honest. The first time I used it, as you know, I live in southern New England, and I had an appointment up in the Boston healthcare system for something I was having done. And they offered it to me. They said, hey, instead of driving all the way up here to Boston, we don't really need to touch you. We don't need to put our hands on you. We can just have a conversation through VA Video Connect. And I said, okay. And so they sent me the instructions, how to go in and download the app. It was a typical app. You just download it onto your phone or your tablet. Very, very simple. And then they send you the link, when it's time, a couple of days before your appointment. I clicked on the link. I had to type in my name and where I was calling from. And that is in case something happens, in case all of a sudden I go unconscious or something.
Oh, so they can find you.
The provider then knows how to call 911 and how to direct them to where you're at.
That's clever.
So that's why they want you to type in like your basic information, just, where are you calling from and that kind of thing, in case, God forbid, there is a problem. But, once that happened, then my provider came on and, we were looking into the camera and we had a conversation and we had an appointment. And now since COVID-19, I've had a number of appointments via Video Connect, and very simple, very easy. And I'm able to get questions answered. I've gotten prescriptions refilled. I said, oh, by the way, I need more of this medication. Okay, we'll put that in for you. We'll have them mail it to you. I think it's an outstanding benefit. And it does give you that freedom to where if you don't have to be physically examined, then you don't have to drive to the medical center and worry about parking and now get checked to make sure you don't have symptoms of COVID-19 and all that. You can just literally have your appointment through the Video Connect and you're off and running. You're all set.
So do you think this is going to be a normal thing for you? Are you going to be replacing a lot of your appointments with the VA with this?
I would like to. if the VA keeps offering it, like if my providers keep offering it. I have a number of follow-up appointments that I do, some of them on a monthly basis, that I don't need to actually be there. It's a conversation. It's questions and answers that go back and forth between the two of us. Other appointments, like I just had an orthopedic appointment to look at a problem I was having with my thumb. Obviously I had to go to the facility for that. They had to put hands on, look at it, feel it, and then
there's no app for that.
And then actually ended up giving me a shot of cortisone in the joint of my thumb, which you're not going to get over video. Exactly right. So there are times when you obviously still have to go to the medical center and be seen by a provider because of the nature of what your appointment's all about. But for those routine or follow-up appointments to where it's just going to be a conversation, this is definitely the way to go.
Well, that's interesting. Might even be something that I look into for myself. Veterans and their families are constantly exploring their benefits, but often overlook those offered by their state. If you join the military out of the state of Texas and are a Texas resident, you could qualify for free college tuition.
Exactly. The Hazelwood Act is a state of Texas education benefit that provides qualified veterans, spouses, and dependent children with free tuition at state schools for up to 150 hours. However, some of the conditions a veteran must have are be a Texas resident when they entered the service, currently live in Texas, have an honorable discharge, and there are several other conditions.
It's a pretty awesome benefit for veterans and their families. So for more information, go to tvc.texas.gov. When we come back, we will be covering some of the birthdays of our nation's heroes to include one of our branches of military. We'll be right back.
Which U.S. president was awarded the Medal of Honor? A. George Washington. B. Ulysses Grant. C. Theodore Roosevelt. D. John Kennedy. E. Andrew Jackson. Which U.S. president was awarded the Medal of Honor? The answer is C. Theodore Roosevelt. President Roosevelt served as a lieutenant colonel in the United States Army during the Spanish-American War. He was awarded the Medal of Honor for bravely leading a charge up San Juan Hill in Cuba in July 1898.
All of us at the SITREP would like for you to join us in saying happy birthday to some of our nation's heroes. And the first one up is Air Force veteran Morgan Freeman, who was born on June 1st and is celebrating his 83rd birthday.
Happy birthday to Chris Christopherson, an Army veteran who was born on June 22nd and is celebrating his 84th birthday.
Happy birthday to Army veteran Randy Couture, who was born on June 22nd and is celebrating his 57th birthday.
And last but not least, happy birthday to the United States Army. June 14th marks the 245th birthday of the United States Army. The Army is the land warfare service of the United States Armed Forces. As the oldest branch of the U.S. military, the Army has its roots in the Colonial Continental Army, which was formed on June 14, 1775, as a unified American army to fight the British Empire during the American Revolution. Under its first commander, General George Washington, the Army won the war and America won its independence. During the creation of the new nation, Congress created the United States Army to replace the disbanded Continental Army. The mission of the Army is to defend the United States by fighting and winning its nation's wars through prompt, sustained land dominance across the full range of military operations. The Army has done this through numerous conflicts, a civil war, 2 world wars, and a current war on terrorism. Soldiers have paid a stiff price for defending America's freedom, suffering 66% of all casualties sustained by the United States military throughout its history. Today's Army is made up of more than 700,000 soldiers, including active duty and reserve personnel. Happy birthday, U.S. Army.
To everybody out there in the audience, thank you so much for watching. We had an awesome show today. And as always, as I've said before, If you'd like to, you can go onto YouTube and search hashtag the SitRep, where you can view all of our content across the board.
And as always, to those who have served or are currently serving, thank you for your service.